Alrighty, you need to be able to graph this piecewise function, and this is what you get on the graphing calculator. Now to graph this, what you're going to do on your calculator is you're going to first, to graph this piecewise, is right next to your number 9 button. There's this little template button. You click on that, and then you choose the one that kind of looks like a 3 by, allows you to have like 3 equations like this. And then when you get to the absolute value part that's also in that template, something you also want to do is make sure your zoom when you graph is on standard. The way you do zoom is you hit menu, and then after that you hit standard. You choose on this, menu, zoom, and hit standard. And one last thing, see how it has a grid here? You want a grid. Another thing you want to do is you want to hit menu, and then from menu you hit view, and then from there you hit grid and hit line grid. A couple things. You want to be in zoom standard, you want to be in lined grid, and then you want to be able to find the template so you can type all this in. Now, how do you type in inequalities? That's right underneath the control button. Underneath the control button allows you to type inequalities. Now, once you do that, it's going to graph this right here. Now, the graphing calculator will not show open circles. You have to imply those. Now, how do I know that's an open circle here? Well, look at this. Isn't that say less than -3? Isn't a less than doesn't mean or equal to? So doesn't that mean it's not included? Where here, do you see it says or equal to -2? See, or equal to means closed? See that is less than, so it's just an open. Where here is or equal to, so it's closed. To describe an edge that is or equal to, you fill it in. To describe an edge that is just a greater than or less than, it's an open circle. And you won't see that on the graphing calculator unless you hit Control T, and then you can kind of look at the table and find it. It's easier just to understand what these notations mean to why you have open and closed circles. Now, we're going to answer these questions. Where is this graph decreasing? So if we're thinking about decreasing here, we're looking where is the graph going downhill. Right here, that's increasing. Isn't it decreasing right there? Then it's increasing right here, and then decreasing. So we need the interval of, that's increasing, sorry. Don't I need that interval, and don't I need that interval? Aren't those the two intervals of dropping or decreasing? So for that, on the blue graph, the first interval for where it's decreasing is from -2 to 0. That's my first interval. And then for the green graph, it's decreasing from 2 to infinity. Those are the intervals for which this graph of 3 different graphs, so it's a combination of 3 different graphs, are decreasing. Next, where is it positive? Now, positive, you have to remember, means where is it above the x-axis? So where is this graph above the x-axis? Well, all of this is below the x-axis. Isn't it only from here to here? Everywhere else is below the x-axis, except for this little interval. So my interval for this particular one will be from 1 to 3. Now, you might be wondering, why am I using parentheses? Why not closed brackets? Well, to have decreasing, you can't ever have closed brackets. Or for positive, you can't ever have closed brackets because the edge is 0. So you have to be careful with open and closed. It's very important, and people miss that up. But for all these intervals so far, everything's been open intervals, meaning parentheses, because you cannot include the edge in the description. For this next one, we will have brackets, because your domain includes certain pieces. Meaning, what domain for this next one is talking about is what values, or what x values has actual graph. Now, from here to -3, don't you have a graph? But at -3, does it stop? Do you see you have a gap in the graph from -3 to -2? Then it picks up again all the way to here, then it stops, but it restarts. See how it stops here, but restarts again? So isn't from -2 forever, don't you have a graph? But the only place you have a lacking of graph is right there. So how do we write that? Here's how you write it. You write from -infinity to -3, parenthesis, because is -3 part of the graph? No. Then I'm going to do, okay, from bracket -2 to infinity. The reason I say that is, isn't that included in the graph? And don't you have a graph all the way, jump up here, for the rest of the time? Those are the two intervals for which you have a graph. And you can see it right here. Do you see how there's a gap between -3 and -2? Do you see how where this one picks up where it stops? By looking at these intervals, your answer for your domain is right there, if you kind of look at that. But it's easier to look at a picture. So where are my zeros? Another name for zeros for some of you, if you forgot, is your x-intercepts. So all we're looking for is where does it cross the x-axis? And hopefully you notice it's just there and there. Aren't those the two spots it crosses the x-axis? So my answer is 1 and 3. Last question, average rate of change. Well, that's slope from 1 to 2. So can we look at the graph and go, I'm looking for that slope right there. So what is my rise over run? Isn't that 3 and 1? 3 over 1 is 3. So isn't my slope from 1 to 2 3?